War has returned to Europe. In the early hours of Thursday, Russian tanks and troops rolled across the border in a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Just moments after their president, Vladimir Putin, announced on television he would launch a so-called special military operation. That operations prompted a chorus of condemnation and vows to hold the Kremlin accountable. But when it comes to defending the nation under attack, NATO has made it clear Ukraine is on its own. I'm Michael Oku in Berlin, and this is The Day.
This 24th of February is a terrible day for Ukraine and a dark day for Europe.
It is President Putin who is bringing war back to Europe.
I'm addressing you, the Russian people, as a Ukrainian citizen. We are separated by a border stretching more than 2,000 kilometers. And right now, there are 200,000 of your soldiers there. And this could mark the start of a major war on the European continent.
One state that is responsible for what is happening now in Ukraine, and that is Russia.
The European Union and its people stand by Ukraine and its people.
There is no justification for all this. This is Putin's war.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
To our viewers on PBS in the United States and all around the world, welcome. They're being called Europe's darkest hours since World War II. Amid the chorus of condemnation and outrage, the historic dimensions of Russia's invasion of Ukraine are left in no doubt. By launching a full-scale attack on a sovereign nation, Russian President Vladimir Putin has sent a shockwave through the global political order. Both the U.S. and the EU say the world will hold the Kremlin accountable for its actions. Putin is warning that any outside interference in Ukraine will lead to consequences, and I'm quoting now, never seen in history. The push to find a diplomatic solution to the standoff was both frantic and fruitless. In an emergency meeting of the Security Council, UN Chief Antonio Guterres urged Putin to give peace a chance. Instead, the Russian leader appeared on television, denouncing the Ukrainian government as fascist and telling soldiers to lay down their arms and go home. Soon after his speech, bomb blasts rang out in Kiev, Ukraine's capital, the city of Kharkiv, the nation's second largest, and Kramatorsk in the east. A look now at how the day unfolded.
With dawn came the bombs. Russia attacked sites across Ukraine. The Russian troops that had been amassing on the border for weeks started rolling in, recorded on surveillance cameras by Ukraine's border police. Russia's leader, Vladimir Putin, announced the military operation in a broadcast on Russian TV. He disparaged Ukraine's democratically elected government and asked Ukrainian soldiers to surrender. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky introduced martial law. And he made an emotional plea to Russians.
I'm addressing you, the Russian people, as a Ukrainian citizen. We are separated by a border stretching more than 2,000 kilometers. And right now, there are 200,000 of your soldiers there. Your leadership has authorized them to move into the territory of another country. And this could mark the start of a major war on the European continent.
Black smoke from a Ukrainian military airport in Chugiev in the east of the country. Russia confirms that they bombed the site. A housing block was hit, and distraught residents were left grieving the first casualties in a new war they did not want.
DW has a team on the ground in Ukraine as we try to monitor this fast-moving and volatile situation. Correspondent Fanny Fashar spoke to us earlier today from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. We asked if people there were afraid as Russian troops draw closer.
Actually, it really depends who you talk to. It's really, you do see the fear in people's eyes, regardless whether they say that they stay put and they want to resist with or without arms. But that fear basically results in different reactions. Some people left or trying to leave Ukraine. There are long queues that are forming both on the highways towards the west, long queues forming at gasoline stations. People were packing up on food and basic things at the few supermarkets that were still open here in Kyiv. So there are people who are really panicking and they want to leave. But then there are others who are concerned as well, but they say they're not going to take the sovereignty, the freedom, the democracy of the country away. In fact, I've just seen a few hours ago a young man on his bicycle carrying a Ukrainian flag. He was the only man here, the only person here at Maidan, at Independence Square. And it really was a picture to me that, yes, there's concern, there's fear, but there's also a sense or a mood of basically not having Russia to say what the future of this country is.
DW's Fanny Fashar earlier in Kyiv. Our correspondents will be reporting developments on the ground for as long as they can. You can follow them on Twitter at DW News and track our live updates on DW.com.
This is a deliberate, cold-blooded and long-planned invasion. Despite its litany of lies, denials and disinformation, the Kremlin's intentions are clear for the world to see. Russia's leaders bear full responsibility for their reckless actions and the lives lost.
That was NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg reacting to the biggest challenge to face the alliance since the end of the Cold War. Russia's invasion triggered a flurry of emergency meetings about how to respond at NATO, the EU, and even the G7. NATO is now moving reinforcements to the east, but says it has no plans to send troops into Ukraine. The EU is meanwhile promising the harshest sanctions it has ever imposed. Here's European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
These sanctions will suppress Russia's economic growth, increase the borrowing costs, raise inflation, intensify capital outflow, and gradually erode its industrial basis. We want to cut off Russia's industry from the technologies desperately needed today to build a future.
DW Brussels correspondent Terry Schultz joins me now. Terry, we heard von der Leyen promising measures that would destroy Russia's economy, unprecedented sanctions. How much pain can the EU inflict?
That remains to be seen, Michael, because, of course, the European Union has in the past imposed what it thought were very tough sanctions on the Russian government, on the Russian economy, in an effort to change its behavior before. And obviously that hasn't worked, as we can see tonight from the way that Russia is taking over Ukraine. So the European Union says this is an unprecedented package of sanctions that's now been passed and that it will be more far-reaching than ever before. What Ursula von der Leyen has said is that they want to cut off Russia's ability to wage war. Seems a little bit late for that at this moment, but that's the effort going forward.
Yeah. Terry, let's get real for a moment. Sanctions are one thing, but they're likely not going to make a bit of difference over the next 48 hours on the ground. Right now, it looks to the world that Ukraine has to fight its way out of this on its own. So what sort of help can the EU offer Ukraine?
It's very difficult to see what help the EU can offer Ukraine at the moment if you're talking about simply trying to preserve the country's sovereignty and its independence. Ukraine is in a battle for its life right now. In fact, Michael, I've just come out of an intelligence briefing with a Western official that says that we may see the capital of Kyiv falling within less than a day. So, when you're talking about possible economic assistance, development aid, those kind of things may ring a bit hollow now to Ukrainians really trying to fight to preserve their country.
Let's take a listen to the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz earlier tonight.
Russia's President Putin has decided to attack Ukraine militarily. This is an attack on an independent sovereign country and cannot be justified by anything or anyone. It's an attempt at shifting borders with violent means in Europe, maybe even to eradicate a whole country from the map of the world.
Terry, the rhetoric we're hearing is astonishing. I mean, the idea that Russia is trying to eradicate an entire country. You've covered European affairs for many years. How much of a shock has this been there in Brussels?
Many people will tell you that what is happening right now is not a shock, because we have seen this buildup on Ukraine's borders now for many months, and President Putin has done it before. So again, this intelligence briefing that I just had said, you know, this is what was predicted he could do, and officials said that he may do it. So many people are not surprised. I think that it is nonetheless alarming to everyone how quickly the Russian forces are able to take over Ukraine. I'm told that that Kiev's two main airports are now under Russian control, a military airport and a civilian airport, that Ukraine has lost control of its airspace already, and that we should take Putin at his word when he says he intends to take over the entire country. So this may have been coming, and some people may say that they're not surprised, but I think everyone will agree that this is disturbing.
Well, the Russian troops were certainly positioned for a swift movement there, that's for sure. Is there a sense there that the EU and NATO overstepped by trying too hard to bring Ukraine into the fold?
Actually, you hear a lot of the opposite. I'm around a lot of Ukrainian journalists who say, you know, if you had given Ukraine NATO membership, Russia would never have dared to step foot on our territory. They are, you know, quite bitter about the fact that Ukraine has been promised eventual membership since 2008, but not given that open door policy. The European Union has signed free trade agreements with Ukraine. Of course, that doesn't give you much military assistance when it comes to Russian forces invading your country. So I don't think the Ukrainians would have said that the EU and NATO overstepped. I think they would say that they understepped.
So, in fact, if Ukraine had been pulled into NATO earlier, that would have been a deterrent to Vladimir Putin. Ukraine's neighbors are now expecting a wave of Ukrainian refugees. How's Brussels trying to get ahead of this?
That's right. And today we did hear Ursula von der Leyen say that all of the frontline states that could expect to receive refugees from Ukraine, the Baltic states and Poland, have been prepared for this, that there is European Union assistance going to these countries. And she said something that I think may be welcome to the Ukrainians suffering so much at this moment. She said that they are welcome in the EU, that the EU is prepared to accept them. She called them refugees right from the beginning. There's no question that they need a safe place while their country is under attack. So yes, the European Union says that it will help take care of these Ukrainians who are fleeing the Russian assault.
That is Terry Schultz in Brussels. Many thanks, Terry. That was the picture here in Europe. Across the Atlantic, U.S. President Joe Biden convened a meeting of his National Security Council. Washington had already slapped sanctions on Russian banks and oligarchs. Now, after the attack, even heavier penalties are on the way.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. Let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East.
Let's get a reaction from Washington now. DW's Oliver Salet is standing by. Oliver, we've heard Biden's response. Russia will pay dearly for Putin's war. How much pain is on the way?
Well, that is the big question, Michael, just how effective those sanctions will be. President Biden described them as severe. He laid out how 4 more banks, Russian banks, will be completely blocked off the U.S. financial markets. And overall, those sanctions are rather targeting the financial sector, not so much the energy sector. Also SWIFT, that financial system that is needed for financial institutions to send money in and out of Russia, is not included. There were some reports suggesting that Germany and Italy might have opposed such a measure at this point in time, at least. Also, President Putin was not targeted directly, so that led to some very noisy scenes there in the White House, with reporters yelling questions at President Biden, who, on the contrary, made clear that he believes that those sanctions will be effective. He said Russia already feels the consequences, described how the ruble is at a historic low, how stocks in Russia are plunging today, and really how in a later time then Russia will have very limited access to the financial markets, as well as technology imports, with the ultimate goal to hurt Putin's inner circle, the Russian economy, and to isolate Russia from the Western world.
Well, sanctions seem to be the big stick that the West is wielding. Biden was crystal clear that the U.S. will not fight a war in Europe. So can the U.S. offer Ukraine any help at all, or are they on their own?
Well, yeah, exactly. And that is the question, of course, of the effectiveness of sanctions. That will be a topic that we'll have to discuss in the next weeks and months ahead. President Biden made clear there will be no U.S. boots on the ground, of course. Ukraine is not a NATO member. But there will be weapon deliveries. Ukraine called for more, and U.S., of course, in the past has already delivered weapons. They promised to deliver more. The question, though, and if you just remember your interview with our colleague Terry Schultz in Brussels, who had sources saying that Kiev might be taken within 24 hours, and of course that raises the question, what do those weapon deliveries, what do they bring at this point in time? And do we have to ask the question in some days, was too little done too late there, really?
Right. You know, Oliver, I suppose it's a gross understatement to say diplomacy appears no longer an option. It's not lost on some of us that this invasion was launched on the same day the U.S. Secretary of State was scheduled for more talks with his Russian counterpart. How will Biden and his team reflect on what really happened in the diplomatic lead up to this invasion?
And that was really chilling, Michael, really to listen to President Biden when he explained how Western leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron, how they followed their diplomatic efforts traveling in and out of the Kremlin in order to get to a diplomatic solution, while at the same time President Putin was already decided preparing for war. Now, the key takeaway, of course, is that the notion that diplomacy would always prevail and deterrence, of course, that this failed. And this is what Western leaders are coming to terms with right now. It failed, at least with Vladimir Putin and the Russian president at this point in time. And we might look back at this day, seeing it as a watershed moment for the international order, of course. And so under these circumstances, President Biden made clear that he will not meet with Putin. So that's certainly a really difficult time in Russian-U.S. relations. On the contrary, both countries also have expelled their deputy ambassadors. And so the situation here in diplomacy between Russia and the U.S. will certainly not improve before Russia stops his attacks.
DW's Oliver Salet in Washington. Many thanks as always, Oliver. We're joined now by Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, retired U.S. Army officer and the former commander of U.S. forces in Europe. Welcome to the day, sir. You are a veteran of the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan. Did you ever expect to see war return to Europe in this way?
Well, look, I'm a realist, and we've been watching Russia now for several years. They invaded Georgia in 2008. And we, the West, did nothing. They invaded Ukraine in 2014, and we really did not do anything consequential. And so what's happening now is a continuation of that. This is awful for the innocent people in Ukraine. but it's the reality we're in now.
You can almost say that those earlier invasions were test runs. I mean, this is a big one. Considering the movements of Russia's military, their targets so far, is it possible to see Putin's game plan and perhaps his end game here?
Well, I think it's clear that what he intends is to bring about the collapse of the Ukrainian government. Started off with going after their economy to isolate Ukraine from the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, the strangulation by having so many forces on the border. Already weeks ago, Ukraine's economy was beginning to suffer. But what he wants is to bring about the collapse of the government and get his own guy into Kyiv, somebody that either is pro-Moscow or at least would be willing to make concessions. I'm sure that's a critical part of it. But also, I think Belarus is a part of this, too. I think we're seeing the next step towards the formal creation of Union State, where Belarus is absorbed into Russia.
You know, we know Russia has far superior forces over Ukraine. But does Russia have the capability to not only invade, but also hold this vast country of some 40 million plus people?
That's a great question. Certainly, Russian Federation forces have significant advantage at sea and in the air, not so much in ground forces. This is a different Ukrainian army than what first met the Russians back in 2014. Here, and of course, it's a little early to be drawing big conclusions, but there have been quite a few very tough, sharp fights around Ukraine, where Ukrainian forces have defeated Russian forces. A couple of critical airfields and places that were lost earlier in the day have already been recaptured by Ukrainian forces. So I can't quite tell yet with certainty where the Russian main effort is or where it's going next. But I still think that the Russians are leery of getting too many casualties, which they are going to be suffering, or that they really do intend to go all the way to Kyiv. I mean, Kyiv is a huge city, 3.5 million people, and the idea that in the next 24 hours they could encircle and capture this entire city, I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case.
Extraordinary, if they did. What do you imagine Ukraine's resistance to look like? And I wonder, even as I ask it, whether it's premature to do so.
Well, I think our Ukrainian friends started late in the process of mobilizing territorial forces, training. But nonetheless, I think that there is a real determination among the Ukrainian citizenry. I've started noticing it a few months ago, and then talking with Ukrainian friends here in the last several weeks. This is something they're serious about. I anticipate that they will resist for a long time. I'm sure that the Kremlin does not want to have over 100,000 of their soldiers in some sort of garrison capacity around Ukraine. And you're right. I mean, this is a country that is twice the area and size of Germany. And with a population of 40 million people, this is not insignificant.
Right. There was condemnation and sanctions after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014. Putin just seemed to brush it off. Now more of the same. Has the international community ceded Ukraine to Russia, or will this be different somehow?
I absolutely do not believe that the international community has ceded Ukraine to Russia. For sure, we were all slow in taking the steps that needed to be taken. I am very proud of the diplomatic effort by the United States here over the past several months. Probably the best, most comprehensive diplomatic effort I've seen by any American administration since the 1995 Dayton Peace Accord. And I'm also proud of the fact that Germany is stepping up. A much firmer German resolve here of late than maybe a few months ago. This is late, to be fair, but nonetheless, it's definitely better. The sanctions, look, the problem with sanctions is that they typically take a very long time for the effect to really be felt. And people like Putin, of course, they will have been protecting themselves for years in anticipation of this. I think that sanctions are a part of it, but we have got to figure out ways to help keep Ukraine in the fight and get the Russians worrying about something else, such as Turkey shutting down the straits to Russian Navy transit. I think that would get their attention.
Just a quick last question for you, General. Is the Cold War returning to Europe with the Iron Curtain a few hundred kilometers just further east?
Well, I mean, this looks like a very hot war to me. And again, we can't think about war the way we did back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. With Russia, they are always at war. And I know that people don't want to hear this. It's unpleasant to talk about. But, I mean, let's take a look at what's been going on since President Putin has been in power. They use poison on their own opposition and then chase down an opponent and murder him in the Tear Garden. This is who you're dealing with.
Lieutenant General, we are going to have to keep it right there. That's Ben Hodges. Many thanks, sir.
Thank you.